Okay, great. So I'd like to acknowledge the land that we are all meeting on today. So everybody's on different country. For me, it's on the Nudgee country, which is in the mid-north of South Australia. And I'd like to acknowledge that the land that we meet on is sacred and sovereign land that has been lived, danced and celebrated on for over 120,000 continuous years. And we pay our respects to all elders past, present and emerging, and especially to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women out there today.
Beautiful, thank you, Nat. And we can thank that wonderful written piece that our comms team put together. I really love it because it's ours, and we're always open to ideas on and information on country and what parts of country. So Nat, I wish I'd had that your country was not named on there. So next time we'll have to do that. This idea came together when Julia and I thought about what we could do that really showcased some amazing rural businesswomen. And Julia just admitted that this was really a group of women that she wanted to catch up with online. So I love that, because when I had a look at the pedigree of our panel, I was like, wow, these women are amazing. I really want to catch up with these women too. So what Business Women Australia is all about is we're a collaborative community. What we do is we design our program every year in conjunction with our premium level members, our leaders. They're our thought leaders, our knowledge experts, the women who are trailblazing in their various communities. And we work with each one of those to say, what are the messages that you want to get out to our communities in across the nation. And so the vision that we've got is to really raise the visibility of amazing women in business, because we know that if other women and young girls see these amazing female trailblazers, then they will be inspired to step up and have big, hairy, audacious dreams themselves. So we're very much about helping each other achieve our goals and dreams, being very generous with our knowledge sharing, building a network of influence and creating opportunities for others. Who is BWA? I think a lot of people think it's just business owners, but it's not. We're actually made up of a lot of women who are in the workforce, who are executives, professionals, managers, C-suite, CEOs, CIOs, marketers, students, but business owners and entrepreneurs as well. So we really are a melting pot across industry and across sector. There are sort of 5 areas that we really focus on when we are looking at our development program every year. One, of course, is leadership, and that is really looking at and sharing the fundamentals of what it is to be agile and brave, courageous leaders. Improving business is always key to our content and our subjects that we run. Personal growth is a big one. We have quite a few circles that we run that are really much focused on very authentic and honest sharing of the shitty as well as the great stuff that happens as a woman forging ahead in business. Influence and profile, and of course connecting, with that comes friendships. Our values, we sat down when we first set out in business. I think someone needs to have a look at that. Thanks, Marie, if you can just mute people as they're coming in. Inclusion and diversity, courage and honesty are really important to us, and open-mindedness as well as the collaboration. My big word this year is experimenting. So if you've got a crazy idea that you want to have a crack at, I'm a good person to talk to this year, because last year was about dipping my toe in the water, and then COVID happened and we started to say, well, we've just got to bring everything online and focus on delivering what we can. But we're really keen to experiment this year. Positive energy and optimism. That's one of my favourite ones because that's me. That's my bit in there. And I love to be optimistic. It's just my natural way of being. So if you are interested in joining, it'd be great to have you join. If you're not ready to join, you can always jump onto our online events. They're no cost. So please do. Members enjoy all these amazing courses for free. There's, I think, 35 or 36 short courses. They're less than an hour. You get a certificate at the end of them, and they've got all sorts of stuff from Torrens University, the evidence-based courses from design thinking through to conflict resolution. They're really awesome. So that in itself is worth a membership, I think. And of course, applications are open for our scholarship expressions of interest. Last year, Kylie Clark was our 100% recipient, and we had about 6 or 7, 15% recipients. And Kylie's now well and truly into her MBA, which has been fully paid by the BWA Torrens Scholarship. For those of you who are on social media, we would love for you to follow us, share, help us showcase these amazing women in business. We have a company page on LinkedIn, follow that. We've got a group on LinkedIn. Please join it. There's no cost to join that. I think it's growing by the day. I think we've got 3,500 women in that group, and I'm really keen for people to share their events, share what they're doing, you know, showcase their products. If they've got a great article that they've written, share it. If there's a question they want to ask, please share it. We've also got loads and loads of followers on Facebook and a private Facebook members group for our paying classics and our premium level members. We've also got Twitter and Instagram. I'm not 100% sure what we put on that. I must have a look at that, but our comms team are very busy across all of those channels. So if you're ever interested in what's going on with Business Women Australia, our calendar of events sits on the website and it's pretty well up to date. March is going to be amazing. But thank you to our collaborative partners. Without these organisations, we could not deliver what we do. And for those of you who are interested in becoming a paying member, please have a look online. If you're not sure about what the differences are, ask me. I'll be very happy to explain what the different ones are. So lots going on in the regions. Bunbury and Rockingham are in the southern regions of Western Australia. In-person events are back on the go. They're lucky ducks, aren't they? Sydney, we're actually, fingers crossed, got an in-person event happening on March the 9th. Our last one we had to bring online. But Lucy Bingle's going to be doing Amplify Your Business with LinkedIn. To identify what you can do with LinkedIn, Lucy is the person to tap into. She's amazing. And that's a breakfast event, a bit early perhaps for those of you who need to drive outside the CBD. Neil, Women Driving Change with the Chamber of Commerce, we're co-planning or sponsoring that. And our Murray region, Peel region man for customer services and brand messaging, I'll be sharing that. Back in Perth, we've got a face-to-face event that we had to postpone when we had a snap lockdown last month, but 3 Drops Wines at the home of 3 Drops owners, Joe Bradbury in Applecross. Like yourself. So we're having a soiree at her house. It's fully booked. It's going to be a lovely event. And the Power of Publishing's online on the March the 6th. If you're interested in writing a book, can everyone just check they're on mute, please? I'm still getting lots of feedback there. Excellent. The Power of Publishing is a great online one. How many of you have written a book? I'm sure a few of you would have, but it's actually a really great way of getting your message out there, building your profile. It brings a lot of opportunities to you. And we have 2 very experienced women, one who has been publishing and supporting women publishing as a book coach, and a lady who's just gone through the experience, Helen Nan. She spent 12 months writing her book, and she will talk about what that's generated in terms of media opportunities and the experience, whether or not she would recommend that for others. It's something that I've always thought might be a good idea, but I don't know how you can find a year to write a book, but I might have to do a picture book. Anyway, we have building strategic alliances. I have two amazing women in STEM, Kerry Ann Turner and Hayley Glasgow. They're very well regarded, high profile women, and we'll be talking about strategic alliances at that level, which will be definitely worth listening to on March the 18th. So what's different about us? We're definitely smaller. We're not a big events company. We are very much real women. We're really about showcasing real women and their knowledge, not necessarily showcasing celebrities, though we think our real women are celebrities in our minds. We're all about authentic sharing and providing a safe space for everyone. So this is recorded. If there's anything that you want to share or you want us to take out afterwards, just let us know. We're very happy to edit out anything that sometimes conversations in these forums can go into different directions, and sometimes very personal things are shared. So we're very happy to take that out. So there's me again. Please contact me, lyn@businesswomenaustralia.com.au. I'd love to hear from everyone. That we've got some lovely new ladies online today. So without further ado, I am going to kick off our Rural and Regional Business Women panel. I am so proud to have these amazing ladies online with us today to share us their success stories, the lessons that they've learnt, their experiences as women in business. And Julia Spicer, as I said, was the orchestrator of this. So my most massive thank you to Julia for bringing this amazing panel together. Julia is the founder and director of Engage and Create Consulting, but she's also, that's not all she does, she's also got the Goondiwindi Business Hub. Is that right, Julie?
Correct, yeah.
So when I first met Julia, I was amazed. I was absolutely impressed with her mission to really focus on bringing that viability and the vibrancy of rural and regional Australia together by helping businesses grow. Nat, we've also got online today. Nat is, there's that gorgeous picture I found from Nat's blog. You must read this article at farmers.org.au. Nat's recently, it's a great article, and Nat's a primary producer and a business owner. So her love of farming, I think, came from that mid-north region where she is there in that picture, I think, in South Australia, and that's where a picture of her husband Dane and their kids with Nat. She also volunteers her time on community and industry boards, and I think I just heard Julia congratulating Nat earlier on for being on the women, is it the Women in Agribusiness? What one is it, Nat? You have to take yourself off mute.
Sorry, it's the Australian Women in Agriculture Board.
Excellent, well done, congratulations for that. Thanks, Nat. Alicia is Antola Trading. Look at those beautiful shirts, and Alicia's not 100%, so she might be nipping out off and on, but we'll hopefully have Alicia for the whole time. So Antola Trading, I had a look at the shirts and the beautiful products online. They're just absolutely fantastic. They're beautiful. And she actually is marketing them as authentic, empowering, reliable workwear brand that focuses on vibrant work shirts for women, men and kids in outdoor industries. But I don't know about you, I'm actually quite often indoors, but I reckon I'm going to actually get online and get some of those gorgeous shirts, because they need to be livening up those boring black suit offices that I have to go into all the time. So I just love the vibrancy of Antola Trading shirts, so check them out. And Jo Palmer. Jo is really driven by this incredible vision to really tap into the human capital and people, the passion and the talent that's in rural communities, really leveraging those opportunities for those who want to live and work in remote areas and those who want to employ remote talent. So Jo's very driven by really focusing on making work accessible for everyone, no matter what location, no matter what gender, physical ability or ethnicity they have. And I can see the passion in what she does by just hearing her talk about that. So I am going to get rid of that sharing and we are going to start. I think what I'll do is I'll get you all just to talk a little bit briefly, sort of a few minutes, just starting off with you, Julia, about something that you'd like to share with us today, just as a bit of an icebreaker.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Lyn, thank you. And thank you for having all of us on here today. I'm coming from Big and Bull country at Goondiwindi, and I am excited that there are so many familiar faces on here today, actually, either people I know or names I know from different things. And I think that really is part of the story and the thread of doing business in rural Australia. We are always connected in some way or another, and I will always tell people that if I had a business based on what I know, I would not work very much at all, but if it's based on who I know, I'll be busy for a long time. And there are lots of faces on here that I have had the pleasure of doing work with before. I guess just in terms of before we kick into some of the conversations, for me, I think it's really important that we kind of can break this story that starting a business needs to be super strategic and well planned out, and there's this long runway of organised activity that happens beforehand. I've had my business for 8 years now. My business turned 8 at Christmas just gone, and it basically started because I didn't want to work where I was working in Goondiwindi, and I didn't want to leave town. So for lots of us, we are creating our jobs, we are creating our businesses because there's not other employment opportunities. And I think when Jo talks a bit about what she does with Pointer Remote, that's a whole industry that's built out of the fact that we have incredibly skilled, intelligent, capable women living in rural and regional areas, and we want to stay living here. And sometimes employment is not an option. So that is the way that the business started for me. That's the way that work started for me. And the reality was, I went to my networks and I said, I have not got a job in 3 months' time. Please send me something you need me to do for you. And that is literally how things started for me. And I've been productive, full on, and doing ever since, really. So I just really want to make sure that we don't need a background in business. We don't need MBAs. We don't need all of these things to be able to do some of the work that needs to happen in our communities. And I think that's the thing for me. The other piece that I just wanted to say at the beginning is really around how we can make the most of the opportunities we have in our regional areas. Marie's just popped a note in about a few of us have worked together before. And I was really in a fortunate position a few years ago to be able to develop some workshops for women working in agribusiness. And they got run at a local level. They were successful. We ran them at a regional level. They were really well received. They got picked up and run nationally, which is where Marie and I crossed paths because we delivered them in southern Western Australia. And that has grown. And sure, that's because I'm a fabulous developer of workshops, right? But it's also because we get to live and work in communities where we are cross-generational, where we are cross sectors, where we all are playing a role in something. And so we get and understand what the challenges are for others in other communities. And so Goondiwindi has its own unique things going on, but it's not that different from what's happening for women and women in agribusiness in Western WA or in Alice Springs or in, all of these other locations where we've been able to do work. And I think that's the piece for me, is how do we unite around our common, what unites us? How do we build that in to be able to actually progress on some of the work that we're really all wanting to do in our communities?
It's so inspiring. I grew up in Three Springs, which is in the Midwest, and I'm sure that my mum had the local shop and my dad was the Shire clerk. So I really get that. I get the importance of being able to create your own sort of destiny in a lot of ways. And I think that sort of beginning really helped me in my life too. Nat, what about you? Have you always had your dreams set on being a primary producer?
I must admit I have been, always been involved in the ag industry one way or another, and heavily influenced by both sides of my family in the agricultural sectors. I should have pointed out before that my dad is Torres Strait Islander, and that's where I get my Torres Strait Islander heritage from, which is not a lot of people understand where the Torres Straits are, or even in fact that it's part of Australia. So for those that are unsure, it's at the top of Queensland, a cluster of islands up there, and of course the Torres Strait Islander people, we hold our own cultural speciality, I suppose, as opposed to other groups, other Indigenous groups of Australia. So with our First Nations groups in Australia, we have always been farmers, and in fact we've been many things in the past. It's just never been taught that way through the Western system, through our traditional education system. So very grateful now that it is getting there. And we're getting the message out that when you know, I say that I've been involved in ag all my life, it's not such a, you know, a surprise to people. What is a surprise is that I've ended up in South Australia farming, as opposed to the nice warm tropic countries of Northern Australia. And I still, after almost 20 years of farming down here, still grapple with the cold. And so my mum on her side are very involved in agriculture as well. So from a cattle point of view, and I grew up both learning about the cultural side from Torres Strait Islander people, but also the I suppose that appreciation that even though you're not an Indigenous person, you can still appreciate country and looking after it and protecting it, as well as operating a viable farm from it. I'm now in a very small country town here in the mid-north of South Australia, and I've learnt that in order to make our community strong and our region strong, we need to have thriving businesses, and that is most important. And what's the word I'm looking for? A diverse population as well. And that's not always happened in our country areas around Australia, and especially in this area. A lot of our Indigenous people have been pushed out when colonisation was happening, and now we're slowly reintroducing that back into the area. So yes, to answer your question, I have been involved in ag all my life through varying aspects, and starting off with beef cattle and, you know, that love of farming of our tropical root vegetables and bananas and those types of things, to now broadacre cropping, grain, and also livestock.
Wow, that's quite a massive jump, isn't it, going to broadacre farming? My goodness. So I think we might like to hear a little bit about what maybe Jo, talk to us about why did you set up Pointer Remote?
I guess a little bit like Jules, not that I was out of a job, it's just that I didn't want to do the job that I was doing. I think is pretty much how I ended up.
Drastic way to find a new job.
But what's quite ironic with mine, I'm a primary trained teacher, and spent most of my sort of 10-ish years teaching in learning support in high schools and primary schools, but always taught in little schools. And I feel that I not fell into, but I guess it sort of just evolved along the way. So Pointer Remote's the third company that I've started, and the journey to there, I guess, was when it's sort of laid out, makes a bit more sense, rather than going from a teacher into like recruitment and rather a different direction. But I started a learning centre that we had running in 3 towns in southern New South Wales, where we did tutoring and school holiday programs. Was my first business. So I had 30 odd teachers working for me across 3 towns, which then segued into post-baby. I actually then was working in live export. Actually, I used to run the sponsorship management for the live export RDC's annual conference, which was completely random, but a girlfriend that I'd gone to boarding school with worked for the RDC and said, oh no, I've got this friend, she's got an ABN and she knows which end of a cow is which, and can talk to people on the phone. And so that's how I landed that job, but it was working remotely from their office in North Sydney, and I did that from our little farm between about half an hour south of Wagga. And after running that business, getting that job, I then started a business with a girlfriend that was managing sponsorship for other companies and events and things in the ag industry. And it was then I was sort of thinking like, okay, unless a job falls in your lap like my job with Live Corp did, or you start your own business, this remote work thing isn't actually a really easy thing to get into. And I think that starting your own business is not for everyone. And I think for a lot of people that do start businesses, it's not for them either, and they shouldn't be running businesses. And I think a lot of that's something I've sort of grappled with a bit because of the, that people like the story of the starting up businesses and things. And I think that sometimes people that, oh, well, I've just got a job, or I just work for so-and-so. And I feel like sometimes that is something that I'm not particularly comfortable with, and I find a little bit problematic, especially in rural communities where having the novelty of like running a shop or doing something a bit different in a business sometimes feels a bit isolating for people that don't work that way or don't work at all or haven't got access to a job that they're skilled and qualified in. And so that sort of snowballed into where I'm at today. So as you mentioned briefly, we've run currently 2 arms of the business, and we're in the process of launching a third, but we have a remote work jobs board that is like a seek for remote work. So if you're a business anywhere in Australia, you can employ people that live anywhere in Australia with a decent internet connection, which is still a challenge again for some people. And then we have also found that there is a huge number of local governments and community groups that are really starting to see, particularly in the last 12 months, how we really can leverage this way of working and managing people to stimulate local economies and really drive growth and security in rural businesses and rural communities themselves. And our third arm that we're working on at the moment is actually building a decentralisation tool to help people that are living in metro areas to actually discover rural communities, not just the regional centres that they've seen on the news or sort of tourist spots on the coast, sorry, not the couch, but to show them that there actually is really amazing communities in rural areas and that there's a lot to offer in these places. So, sorry, that's a very long-winded.
I love that slip of the tongue, because I think that's actually what's been going on during COVID, is that people have been doing a lot of searches online about rural places to live from their couches, where they'd rather be, where they can go outside and not be stuck inside on their couch. I love that.
100%. But I think as well, like this, felt like I'd been shouting into it's our 4-year birthday next month. Like I was sort of shouting into a void for the first 3 years, and then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, like that stuff you were talking about, that actually works. I'm like, we've all been doing it out here for a lot longer, but it's as if
that's right. That's what I say. If you hang around long enough, people will start.
Yeah.
That's very true. Well, what about you, Alicia? Have we got you still? How are you feeling? And tell us a little bit about some of the things that you've been exploring in your business.
Yes, I'm still here. I haven't run off just yet, but I suppose the last year Antola's grown quite a bit, because it's probably the first year that I've been able to do it full time, because I've got a cattle property as well. So I grew up out in the country and then went away to school when my parents got divorced, and then went to uni to do fashion design. But when I finished fashion design, I came straight home to pay for my uni, and I thought I'd only be there for a year because I thought it was just, I suppose the experience I had with working on the land was always holidays. It was exhausting. There were no other friends. There were no shops there. There was nothing that I enjoyed there. It was just work. And so I couldn't really think of anything worse than just being stuck out in the middle of nowhere, working on a property with my brothers and my dad. But then I came back to pay for my course, and somehow it just got back into my bones again. And I was there for 10 years. So yeah, in that time, I very quickly sort of loved being rural again, and the challenge of learning a new skill that I obviously wasn't taking much notice of when I was on holidays. It was just felt like something we had to do, but I learned to really and the communities out there, because we had a couple of different properties in our family, so we travel around to the different properties and get involved in the different communities. And I still think there's absolutely nothing like, a rural community. And that probably is one of the biggest things I fell in love with, and knew that now that I love that. Is that my internet? I don't know. How am I going to back both of them? How am I going to have this creative sort of side and also live in the middle of nowhere and do what I love there as well? Because when I was growing up, I didn't really have a role model in form of a female out there, brothers and my dad, and I didn't see any other females doing the job that I did. So for a very long time, those 10 years, I tried very hard to fit the mold of competing with the boys rather than just being different and being a girl in that industry. And I suppose that's probably where Antola came about, was just this frustration that wouldn't go away, that I didn't feel like there was a place for me, be who I was, and also be respected in doing a good job in what was.
Oops, sorry. I think I've just
Sorry,
I accidentally muted you and I was trying to mute someone else.
It's okay. So about 5 years ago, I eventually started Antola just as a side hobby to fulfill that creative need in my life. And bit by bit, it's just grown and grown. And now we're at the stage where we're employing 3 people, and all of them are remote. And that's been a really important thing to me, is keeping the jobs in the country, even though one is marketing manager. She could have been in the city quite easily. The other one is the warehouse manager. We're building a warehouse on the property at the moment. And there's definitely a lot easier ways sending out the packages from the city. It costs a little, pretty much about the same, but it means that a company's getting that job rather than the person who's doing it now is a mum of 3 kids. Her husband's manager of a property, and she now has a 3-day-a-week job doing that full time. And I just don't see why we can't keep those jobs there when the talent and the skills and the want for those jobs are there. And that's been a really important thing to me with Antola, along with having stories for each of the shirts that show the individuals that are out there, that they're not going to just fit one mold, or this is what a farmer's wife looks like, or this was it looks like for a female to be in any type of agricultural industry. It sort of all ties together, I feel like, with the shirts themselves, because they are individual. And that's what I struggled with for 10 years, was feeling like that I just wasn't seen, or there wasn't a place for me to be seen in that industry. So that's a very mixed way of trying to explain what Antola is, I suppose, apart from just we make work shirts.
I love it, because I think there's a real movement in the world to much more conscious consumption. And I think that, you know, all generations are really looking for, you know, the equivalent to slow fashion and, you know, slow cooking food, you know, from the producer to the plate, you know, whatever it is that we're consuming. I think we're consuming less, and so we're being more careful about what it is that we're buying. We want to know where it's come from. You know, we want to know about its value to our local economies, to the sustainability of business and the products. So I think, you know, the values that are really underlying what you're talking about there are really going to resonate with consumers, not just those going to be awesomely well-dressed and vibrant people in the bush. But like I said, until I'd done my research on you, I didn't even know you existed. And I'm like going, wow, I'm going to be getting online and ordering some of these gorgeous shirts and now hearing that you've actually, a part of your business is about employing people in the region and rural areas, that makes it even more valuable. So good on you. And we'll get a little bit into some more depth about that shortly. I'm going to flick back to Julia. Julia, you know, there's so many opportunities that maybe have come even from the new normal that COVID has sort of given us, some we've been sort of put into some sort of pause to really think about things. What are the opportunities that you're seeing, Julia, that you really would like, you know, you'd like to see pursued?
Thanks, Lyn. And I think, you know, for me, it really is around the action of making progress for our communities. And so Jo, Alicia and Nat are all great examples, and there's 20 other women on this call who are getting shit done, excuse my language, you know, and that's the piece for me that I think is really important. I think at the moment, you know, as Jo touched on, with all of COVID, people have realised that living regionally is quite good. We can do our social distancing pretty easily. And I think the other thing is that businesses have had to change how they do business. So we are set up to work from home. Add the challenge of internet, but I think that's an ongoing one and we can work out how to do that. But I think this opportunity about how to really position ourselves in the regions to promote, not just come here to retire or not just come here to, you know, live for a while, but you can run a really professional business. You can be you can have a really great job. Your family can have a really engaged life living regionally. I think we need to really think about how we can start to get rid of the poor cousin kind of conversation that often happens regionally, and we need to really start positioning ourselves as viable and vibrant communities. There's diversity, there's all of these opportunities. You can have a really good job that doesn't have to be in the CBD of a capital city somewhere. So I think that's really important. I think the opportunities that I see is how we can better engage and use people in our communities, and I say use nicely. You know, we have a lot of talented women that move to communities or marry. I always say to the guys around Gundy that they've married very well. They somehow find these women that are super intelligent and super switched on and get them to move, and it's brilliant, and we need more of it, but we need to also then be able to make sure that those women feel part of the community, that they've got a way to be able to work and do what they want to do. And I think there's lots of opportunities to be able to have a look in that space. And I think the thing for me that I find really interesting from a regional perspective that I would love for us to be able to see more is how we tap into the fact that we can actually access decision makers more easily in our areas. If I lived in Melbourne, I would not have much chance of running into the mayor at Coles on the weekend when I'm doing my groceries. That happens in Gundy all the time. I have straight lines to key decision. I don't do the groceries every week, but you know, if I did, then I would probably bump into him. But similarly with our state members and our federal members and the key decision makers, industry, association people, we run into them all of the time. And yet sometimes I think we don't always use that opportunity to be able to progress and move forward the things that we want to be doing. And I think part of the COVID story showed at a state and federal government level is that people were prepared to make decisions without having all the information. Now, politicians don't often do that. They wait forever and nothing ever happens, you know. So how do we make the most of this? How do we use the fact that from an opportunistic point of view, we can tap into our decision makers much more easily because we know them. We can access these people. And so I would just really love to see how we can do some of that more into the future. You know, people talk about the CWA having the most influence in all of the industry associations in Canberra. You know, every door opens for CWA. Well, I know the CWA ladies here. I would be scared not to open a door for them as well. So how do we make the most of that? You know, because we're bringing a different way to have some of these conversations. So I think the opportunities at the moment for regions and then the subset of that being women is really exciting at the moment. And I'm really keen to be part of some of those conversations, whether it's business, whether it's employment. But I think, you know, that as an area of opportunity and doing it from a base of economic development. This is not community welfare. This is not, you know, this is not doing it in any other format from a basis of economic development. I think there's real opportunities at the moment for us to tap into that.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, Nat, maybe you could share with us some of the challenges that you see, not just for primary producers, I think, Nat, but also, I mean, you've experienced, you know, different parts of and different kinds of rural and regional settings, but for you know, businesses in general, what are the challenges that you know, you'd like to see overcome?
Yeah, and I should have added to my story before about how I ended up in South Australia. I think I might just finish up on that first before I enter into the challenges, because that came with a whole heap of other challenges. So moving from somewhere that was so multicultural and in the top end of the Northern Territory to Roseworthy College, Ag College, to study natural resources and agriculture, I was surrounded by a lot of white males from rural backgrounds. So can you imagine their opinions when all of a sudden this, you know, Torres Strait Islander chick rocks up and wants to study ag? So that gives you an example of, you know, their backgrounds and their families and their towns that they come from as well. And one of the main challenges we have in these, you know, rural country towns that are not diverse is changing mindsets and opening up the door to allow others to come in. And really, you know, having that diversity, like I mentioned before, adds to everybody's lives, and also builds economically our regions. I suppose I've seen, you know, just how it works. Here in the mid-north, we're still getting there. It's a little bit frustrating, but we're still getting there. So at the moment, we have a lot of migratory populations coming in to do the grape picking, or maybe they've set up and running restaurants in the main street. But on the whole, I suppose what has been traditionally mindset towards diversity, it's still there, and we need to challenge that and change that so that we are a lot more welcoming. I was flicking through LinkedIn last night, and I found this awesome quote, and it says, "Don't adapt to the energy in the room, influence the energy in the room." And I think I bring that to a lot of the to everything I do, I suppose. And there's a technique to it. So if you're going to influence something, as I learned a long time ago when Julia and Catherine Marriott came down to South Australia to run a really amazing women's course back then, in how to create social license or deal with social license. It's using those key messages, as you all know, as women in business, is using those shared values to get your message across. And that is so important when addressing anything. So for me, you know, in a small country town where diversity is, you know, still quite a big thing, and some people really don't know how to behave or react around me or anybody else that has a diverse background, but also women who are farmers as well. You know, I could be as educated and skilled and knowledge in the space of agriculture, yet still be considered maybe a farmer's wife, or maybe even the secretary, depending on who's asking. I'm really, really glad to say that there is a shift now in that, and it is all to do with your delivery and the way that you present yourself. Some of the other challenges, I suppose, is again racism. So racism is much more evident to people who are different to the main populations. And a lot of the time it's indirect racism, and people don't really understand the difference between direct racism and indirect racism. But if you don't understand it, it's really important that you do. So that's one of my key messages today. I think I'll leave it there, Lyn.
Well, can you just talk very briefly about that? I think that's important for us to actually dive a bit into that. So give us an example of indirect racism that's really impacted upon you.
So an example of indirect racism is, you know, if you're in the shearing shed, I'll give you an example. I'll story tell because I love to tell stories. And one of the shearers crack a joke about, you know, a situation involving an Aboriginal person and maybe a couple of other ethnic, different, diverse groups walking into a bar. And, you know, it's not appropriate. You know, to them it's a joke, but that is still racist. So if it's being said in a joking way, if you are talking about somebody else in a negative, derogatory way, that is still racism. And it needs to be pointed out, otherwise it'll never be addressed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that something that we're all very conscious of, particularly in terms of what's happened in Parliament, is that even those that can see what's going on and maybe not stepping up and speaking out and making known when things aren't being said the right way or people aren't behaving the right way, they're also a part of the problem. So I think that's a really good example, Nat, and it's one that I think Australians have always used this sort of cop-out, I think, white Australians, you know, of joking around the larrikin. It's, you know, if we like you, you know, we'll you know, have a go at you, crack at you, you know, this whole, you know, joking, fighting part of our culture, which really doesn't stand anymore. It's hurtful. And I think that as Australians, it's a part of our culture that we really need to stop and take time out to think about, you know, to be more loving and caring and respectful. So thanks for sharing that. I think it's really important. It's quite often the elephant in the room. I'm going to come over to Jo. What about you, Jo? What types of challenges? You would have very different challenges than what Nat's experienced. I expect there aren't a lot of women around in your world that have set up on, you know, these kind of online businesses and really tackling some of the massive national issues that you're seeing. That would also bring with it certain challenges. But what are the challenges that you see for businesses in the regions generally?
Well, I can't be on a recorded session anywhere without flagging the fact that connectivity is still a massive thorn in the side of gosh knows how many people across rural Australia. So look, straight up, that the fact that when I first started the business, it was like the back end of things was pretty rough, but I still onboarded every job seeker that we had, and I spoke to, I think for at least the first 18 months, I spoke to every single person that registered with us. And one of the questions that I had to ask them, like, can you FaceTime your friends? Like, is your internet good enough to FaceTime a friend? And I genuinely had to say to people, like, not yet, like I can't, I'm trying to push the proverbial uphill with getting people to employ this way. And I just can't put, even if you are this amazing ex-management consultant from KPMG with 15 years experience, that if your internet connection is just not strong enough, then I can't put you forward for jobs, because it will just not work, and then it ends in tears for both parties, and it ends in tears for me. But I guess that is such a real challenge for so many people. And I think because the numbers are just still so small, like when we're doing numbers on everything, like we've got what, 25 odd million people in Australia, and only a third of us are in the regions. And then that number just keeps getting smaller and smaller as you move further away from regional centres. And just the tyranny of distance and the costs of infrastructure and all of these things, that it just gets a bit too hard basket. And so it genuinely is this feeling around the fact, well, I'm actually not that important for anyone. I can't get a decent internet connection. And so there is that feeling, a real challenge that we see, particularly with women. And to be honest, it doesn't have to be on a cattle station in Western Queensland. Like, that isolation can actually be relatively close. Like, I've got friends that are only half an hour's drive from a regional centre of Wagga, and their internet connection is so hopeless that there is no way that they could sustain a remote job if they were planning on doing it from home. So I think we've really been shifting a lot of our energy, even just the terminology. So work from home, shifting that from work from anywhere. And so working with a lot of the local governments that we work with on how they can be supporting people that live in their region to access work this way, by like activating businesses or workspaces or things that are in town. So for example, there's a town in sort of central West New South Wales that we have done a lot of work with, and they had a huge number of council owned buildings in the main street that weren't being used, and they have put the internet on in there. They've put beautiful desks and chairs and things in there, and people that live in the Shire can go in and work for free out of there. And there's such amazing opportunities where things are brewing away. You mentioned the CWA, Jules, but like looking at doing things in New South Wales with, again, the CWA is like the Catholic Church. They've got property all over the place. And so how we can actually be activating a CWA building in a small town to become a co-working space, because it's not just that connection as far as the internet and that physical digital connection, but all of those connection things that come from going into a place like the Goondiwindi Business Hub, or like we've got these beautiful co-working spaces that are popping up all over the place, and they don't have to be as beautiful as like the Exchange in Dubbo, which is this grand, glorious old building that's been done beautifully. I've worked in the Lake Kajelico Council has Lachlan Shire Council has little 2 hot desks at Lake Kajelico that you can go and sit in there. But what's so fabulous is that you get to meet everyone else that's in there, and that connection thing is just so vital for, do you know what, even if you're not working, to just come in and scroll through Instagram with it being able to happen at a breakneck speed, and to have a coffee down the street. That connection thing is a challenge that I think that is still very real for a lot of people, but it's exciting that there is things happening around that to improve it. But I think
I love the positivity there. You know, I think we were talking about challenges, but we always end up on a high note with you, Jo.
Well, I think I know that as well, but touching like briefly on what you said, Jules, as far as like a local being in a regional rural area, being able to have access to your pollies and your local government and all of those sorts of things. I've found the last 12 months like that that can be for anything. I sort of set myself a bit of a goal for 2020 that was to try and meet at least the regional development ministers from each state and those sorts of people. And I thought that I was going to be spending lots of times on planes. And I thought, especially during lockdown, I was like, man, they're all sitting at home as well. And so I just was boldly like reaching out to all of these federal politicians and state level politicians. And you know what? Most of them got back to me, and most of them did a Zoom with me because they were twiddling their thumbs at home. And so I think that it doesn't have to be just that access thing to those in your local area. Like, go large. I swear, I was in Canberra a couple of weeks ago, and I think like the people are starting to cross the road when they see me now. I'm like a serial pest that's harassing people for all sorts of things. So,
yeah. Well, Steph's asked, are there any resources on how to set up or advocate to their council to set up a co-working space? She currently works from a cafe, which is lovely, but would love a co-working space in Borough.
yes.
So maybe yeah.
I know, Steph. We can talk, Steph. There is, look, you've got a very noisy advocate in me. I've literally got like I'm very convincing these days.
Yeah. I think when you're on a roll,
doing things. But yeah, more than happy. And again, like if other people in their local areas are wanting a hand reaching out, I got lots of things that I can be of assistance with that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. That's brilliant. There you go, ladies. You've heard it from Jo. She'll be inundated now. Alicia, what about you? You said this is probably the first time that you've been able to focus full time on your business. So what are the opportunities that you see for Antola Trading?
I'd say the opportunities feel, reasonably endless, especially with people like Jo encouraging people to consider remote workers, because I think there's this plethora of skill and enthusiasm for especially women in rural and regional areas that want something more, that either worked in, had skills in other jobs before they somehow moved to the country, or even like me, I grew up there, but I was interested in other things and I didn't really see there was much opportunity to do those things apart from if I moved to a town or, and even in towns, I mean, the opportunities are still slightly limited unless you make them for yourselves to a degree. So I think the only challenge I would say in that is when I started, because you didn't really see a lot of women starting their own businesses, it was hard to sort of be taken seriously in that this is a viable income. In my area, and my family is pretty traditional farming family. I don't think there's many other areas in the world, apart from agriculture, where you're sort of in your town and all of your friend base and your community do the exact same job as you. Like, that's a fairly weird thing. You don't get that in the city or in small towns. Everyone's doing different sort of jobs, but in the country, you might go to a race meeting or something and all of your friends do the exact same job as you. So if you go and start another business and you're doing something different, you stand out and people are like, what do you want to do that for? Like, you have to be strong enough and committed enough, and I suppose passionate enough in what you want to do to push through those boundaries. And once you do that for a period of time, and they will start taking it seriously. But I think that's a bit of a challenge, especially for women in regional areas, to have enough confidence and feel like they've got enough support network to start in the first place. And a major thing for me was not having that connectivity when I first started. I had 3G network. I didn't have any other internet. So I used to get up on the roof on the house after work and email manufacturers and things like that, because it just wasn't enough reception. And I'd talk to Telstra with the internet, because the communities are smaller out there. It's not viable for them to replace towers. So I'd be on the phone to Telstra for weeks, trying to get internet back on and that was a huge frustration, but I'm also incredibly stubborn. So I just didn't want to and have massive fear of failure. So once I started and people knew about it, I couldn't stop. But I can see how a lot along the way, those sort of struggles of not having support network, or even just connection to a support network. Like doing this 5 years ago would be an impossibility for me. There's just no way in the world I could get on a Zoom call at all. It's definitely got better, but there's still a hell of a lot of places that are still in the same struggles. So what's the point in even, trying? If you can't Google something, and town's the city's 5 hours away, it's kind of hard to start a business that no one really knows what they're doing when they start business. Most of the business everything that I learned when I started was from Google. So on my roof. So if you can't do that, that's a massive struggle. But now that it is getting better, I think the opportunities for women seeing other women doing it and realizing that they have a support network if they want to have a go at doing something, just open up a huge amount of opportunities for the gems of women out in country areas. I just get so excited about it, and that's partly why I selfishly wanted to name all the shirts after people, because I'm so interested in women doing amazing things, and usually under the radar. They're always so bloody humble about it. And I just love their stories, and I love that I don't think they even know they're doing amazing things, but us naming each of the shirts after women like that, it means we have to go and find them, and we have to learn about what they're doing and then write about it, and someone else might read that, and just them being passionate about what they're doing, shows someone else that if you care about what you want, don't worry about all the boundaries or anything else, the struggles that you might go through, just keep pushing through, and you'll get to where you want to go, not to prove it to anyone else, but for yourself and for your own fulfillment. And just, it doesn't have to be a massive, blow out of the water thing. You don't have to be, something incredible, but you just do what you're passionate about, and it will 100% inspire someone else. You don't know who it is inspiring either while you're doing it.
Is there a story attached to one of your shirts that really stands out to you? Is there one that's like your favourite? I say that to me too. I could not pick a single story, because so I've got a marketing manager at the moment. She's writing the story through. She just wrote Nat's as well, which was a beautiful story. And I get so excited when she says, "Can you read the draft of this story?" And that's my treasured time of work. And I will then sit down in the afternoon with a cup of tea and read these stories. And every single one of them, there's something in it. I'm like, I didn't even know this person was out there, that they're doing these things. And they seem so innocuous what they're doing, and that they didn't realize that their story is so inspirational. And each and every single one of them is inspirational to me, because it isn't a big showy thing usually. That it isn't one massive thing that this person's done. It's just continuous amazing things, and perseverance and confidence in themselves and passion for what they love. That's sort of the thread, I suppose, through every one of the stories, is some sort of internal confidence that these women have had to do what they're doing day to day and continue doing it, rather than just sitting in the passenger seat and cruising along and going with the flow, I suppose. And where do those stories go? Do they go on your website or?
Yeah, they're all on the website. We've got a blog on there, so you can go through and read every single one. And there's a beautiful picture of each of our ladies in their shirt, and they're also on our social media as well, on Facebook and Instagram too.
Well, I would love for your marketing manager let her know that you can share that on our LinkedIn group as well. So, maybe once a month do a showcase that links back to your website so that all our members, I think we've got 3,500 in there. So it's also a great way of showcasing your business as well. So, and they're the sorts of stories that our community loves. I mean, we are often most inspired by our sisters in business, no matter where they are, but especially those who are really trailblazing, against the odds to make a difference in the world. So it's an absolute inspiration. We haven't got a lot longer, but what I'd like to do is maybe for you all to think about who has been a great influencer, a cheerleader, an ass kicker in your life that you'd like to have a shout out to, and why? Because I think that part of our values is really about being supportive of each other. And when we hear about how other people have supported those who are really stepping up and making a difference, it gives us ideas on how to be supportive of each other. So I'll throw over to Nat now. Maybe Nat, is there a businesswoman or someone you would like to make a shout out to?
Thanks, Lyn. Yeah, this is one of my favourite questions. And apart from Jules there, who's been an absolute inspiration for me since I met her at National Rural Women's Coalition e-leaders course, I don't know how many years ago now, on screen. It started off on screen as a facilitator. We've developed a relationship throughout this time. I wanted to also mention Catherine Marriott, who has, just been my cheerleader this whole time. So I met her through my auntie, heading along to one of her influential women's courses. And my auntie in Queensland, she owns the cattle sale business in Queensland. She said, Nat, you need to get onto this woman. She's amazing. Do not give up an opportunity to see or to be involved in one of her influential women's courses. So I did. I lined her up. I said, Kath, you have to get down here. And I went along to one of her workshops, and we just kicked it off and had a blast. And she's been a fantastic mentor for me my whole life since I met her. And the best thing about her is she's authentic, and she has a great moral compass, and she's not afraid to stand up to giants. And that is just inspirational.
Awesome. Maybe we'll have to have her on one of our panel events soon. That's brilliant. And what about you, Julia? Is there someone that you'd like to mention, do a shout out to?
I actually will have to. She owes us some money, Nat. I actually also had Catherine on my list as well, and that piece around integrity was really important. I mean, there are a lot of women that I could list, and I have made it where I am, if that's anywhere, because of the women in my life. But I guess I actually want to do a shout out to Mum, if that's not too brown nosy, as the eldest and favourite child that she has. So Sue's. So for me, Mum married a farmer. She grew up in a city and married a farmer, and I saw firsthand what it's like for somebody that is not born into this crazy world of rural Australia, what that can be and how that can be challenging. But I think the things for Mum that really have then stood the test of time for me in my life is a piece around the love of learning. So always looking at what it is that we love and want to pursue and following our interests was certainly something that we, particularly my sister and I, were really taught to appreciate and look for. Certainly looking for the adventure in the normal is something that we got from Mum, and I think that's another thing that we can make things exciting, and we can create our own adventures wherever we are. And I think particularly those two things, because I did grow up in a family where what we were told was that girls could do anything, and yet what we saw was not always the same. And so we've really kind of lived with that bit of a you know, that bit of tension growing up. And I think there's a lot of people in my mum's generation who would be really proud of the generation of my age bracket, and what we've been able to achieve in some of our rural areas, because it's stuff that they would have loved and they didn't quite get there, but they've provided this beautiful pathway for the rest of us to be able to take advantage of that work.
Yeah, that's a great shout out. How to be able to instill curiosity and courage, you know, into all your children is one of the things I think as a parent, you know, it's one of the key things really, isn't it? Particularly in a world we know that's going to be so quickly changing all the time, and their ability to be curious and have the courage to adapt. What about you, Alicia? Is there someone that you would like to do a shout out to?
Well, my cheerleaders have always been my friends, my female friends and family along the way, but none of them actually sort of run their own businesses. So definitely in the last year, my biggest cheerleader and kick-asser is Julia. I started working with her, and she's been a real inspiration to me with opening me up to networks and communities of other really strong, inspirational women. And I'm a big believer in you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and she's really helped in expanding that network of business women. I suppose that area I felt fairly isolated until I met Julia, and she's been massive help and encouragement, and just her energy has been, it's so good to talk to her each month that I do, and gives me that extra little rock to keep going and networking and meeting new people and kicking all the goals that we are with Antola. So yeah, definitely Julia.
That's a great shout out, and I think I feel the same way about Julia. The time I met her, I just was like so impressed with this just amazing energy that she brings to the table. And to round things off, Jo, what about you?
Well, wouldn't you believe it? I've got a missed call from Catherine Marriott on my phone while we've been doing this. No lie.
The ears must be burning.
Which is hilarious. And look, Alicia, I'm with you as far as Jules. I'm not going to bang on any more about her, because I agree all of the things that you've just said there. It's like, she is infectiously awesome, and that I love spending time. And we have got a well, I was going to say a bad habit, but we have like this ridiculous habit of every time any sort of opportunity to do something together comes across our desk, we both almost within immediate 5 minutes of each other send each other the same email and be like, hey, we should do this together. But I've been really lucky, and like Alicia, this might be something that maybe Jules, we need to talk about offline, but I have got a very fabulous group. There's 5 of us that have got a WhatsApp group that we set up a good few years ago now with 4 other girls. So Airlie Trescothick, who has the farm table, Simone Kane, who's George the Farmer in South Australia, Claire Dunn, who's got Grazie Her magazine, and is that 5 of us?
One more.
Oh, Fleur Anderson, Fleur, who is lives in central Queensland and runs the Rural Business Collective. And we sort of started the WhatsApp group because I was like fangirling over all of these other girls, and I was like, that feeling of, like you mentioned, Alicia, that feeling of sort of isolation sometimes that you, especially because I was doing babies as well, and a lot of my girlfriends that were off work and sort of doing coffees and all those sorts of things, and then I'd have to sort of trot back off and go and do some work, and I was sort of missing that people to moan about things when things weren't going all that great, and to get a little back pat when I needed to. And so I reached out to these girls and I'm like, this is what I'm really needing at the moment. And they were like, oh my God, like, where have you been all my life? This is fabulous. And so it's been really good. We can be very vulnerable in there. We can share balance sheets when they're looking diabolical, and we can sort of say, hang on, is this right? Like, I've been asked to do this, or can you check over this quote, or can you look at this proposal? And it has been a game changer for me, having those girls at my beck and call, and I thoroughly recommend just reaching out to people like that as well. I'd cross paths with all of them, like either socially or randomly at different bits and pieces. But do you know what? Like most of the time, if you're feeling it, there's other people, and even if you just sort of put the call out, that it's like they're probably feeling it as well. And so that has been just the most amazing resource and cheer squad for me. So they get my, sorry, I get 4 shout outs. And Maz.
I love that. The rule breaker. Well, look, I have to say the 4 of you ladies today have been absolutely inspiring, and there's so many lessons that are just embedded in the conversation today that we could all take with us, you know, as women in business, wherever we might be operating. And I think, you know, the concept of being connected and being courageous, staying positive. The chat box on the side's been going crazy all the way through. It's been phenomenal. I have to say this has been one of the most enjoyable panel discussions I've ever had, and I really can't wait to do another one. We have recorded this. Some of you ladies have jumped on very late in the session, I've noticed, but we will record this, and I'll share the recording link to everyone so you can jump on. It's definitely worth listening to this conversation. It's been wonderful. A big shout out to all 4 of you busy ladies. Running these businesses is phenomenal, and you've given us so much of your precious time, and we really appreciate it. I'm actually going to stop the recording now, but what I'll do, oh, hang on. I think I have to hand over to. Oh, I hope I recorded that. It says it's recording now. Uh-oh.
Lyn, I think I accidentally hit record on my computer. So
that's good. Do you want to stop recording?
When...
And you can send it through. That's all good.